I'm
Rah!
angry about cats.
When did we all get this dumb? Almost only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and nuclear warfare. I don't see any bodies, so it doesn't count.
I'm angry about cats.
I'm the chef. I want to hear one thing. Yes, chef. Come on, man. Use your brain. The Why I'm Angry podcast starts now. All right, it's the Why I'm Angry podcast. We are back. It's been a little while. We took a little break, kind of figured out some things, figured out life, worked on some different quality issues we've been having, and now we are back and better than ever, I think. This is the chef, and we're here in the Man Cave Studio, the Freestyle Man Cave Studio, here in northern Dayton. And, there's been some things over the last couple weeks that I want to address, that I've wanted to talk about, but I wanted to get out of the super publicized sides of things. This new school shooting, again, it honestly, it breaks my heart. We have mass shootings, and mass shootings are bad. Killing more than 4 or 5 people in a single run, and that's said kind of tongue in cheek, but killing any amount of people in the course of your day is probably not a good thing for you to do, obviously. But when you go out and you go out with the intention of killing multiple people, and this one, the more and more you hear about it, the more and more that goes into it, the more you find, it's she, whatever, was deeply disturbed. And one thing that I don't know if anyone else caught on, but the one thing in the 2 manifestos that I saw, and I didn't get a full chance to read all of them, but somebody was showing, and I just happened to see it as I went by. Somebody was showing how in the 2 manifestos between the Texas shooting and the of the Presbyterian Church school, and this recent one in Minneapolis, is that both of them talked about taking the innocence of the youth, and in that, I thought that was interesting and disturbing, and kind of, you know, I happened to listen to some Eric Erickson the other day, and he surprised me, and he came out right out and said it. It honestly sounds like demon possession. And we talk about how, as a Christian, I've kind of talked about it with my wife, he has a degree in psychology, and just what this whole thing looks like. And yes, it can be, it seems like it's a mental health issue, but we've talked about it kind of at length, and it really feels more than just a mental health issue, as a spiritual condition, an issue with the fact that it could be demon possession. It could be um an influence of that kind of strong man in the community. And I know that people don't talk about that, but there are spirits, and there is good and evil in the world. and there is a God, and honestly, there's a lot more going on than I understand and I know. And so, with that being said, I think that we have to be careful and we have to be aware of what's going on. And we can shout and cry about whether there's guns or whether we should have guns, or who thinks the guns are good and who thinks the guns are bad. And the Constitution says that guns should not be infringed upon, and so we shouldn't create new gun laws, or we shouldn't restrict guns. And we can say that we need responsible gun laws, or we can say that we need to ban guns altogether. And we can fight all about the weapons that we use to kill people. But I looked up the laws, the difference between the UK and America in the murder rates, in the homicides, and I thought, and I just wanted to get the full kind of picture between, a country who heavily bans guns, and a country who, embraces guns as a weapon of safety, and a weapon of security, for our country. We, you know, you can say anything you want about our forefathers, but our forefathers held a strong sense that, you know, our government could attack us at any time, because the second that we didn't want to pay taxes for, as a group, because we weren't being represented. And we honestly, as a country at that time in 1770s, 1760s, we just wanted to be represented. We just wanted to have a vote to, you know, be able to say yes, we need to be, we need these taxes, or no. And we wanted some of that money that we were paying the government to come into our own country. We were sending taxes on sugar. We were sending them taxes on tea. We were sending them taxes on the things that we grew, an overall excise tax, an import tax, and export tax. We were paying taxes to the government for everything, but we weren't getting anything in return. There wasn't a giant British, military here keeping us safe from, the Native Americans or the French or the Spanish, because there were French and Spanish settlements in the United States, which was not the United States, would have been America, or North America, um, as it is now. I mean, you just would have been America at that time. But what they built, what they put into the Second Amendment was the right to protect yourself. I At this point in the US, if we went and rounded up all of the guns, we would still, at least for 15 or 20 years, probably still have gun violence because of gangs, because of cartels, um, because of rowdy Canadians. I don't know. I mean, you just, Mexico doesn't control their guns. You've got in Europe, it's a little different because the European Union has made an effort to control the guns and stuff like that, and so there aren't as many weapons in the country, and honestly, there may never have been as many weapons, because as Americans, we have relished and we have, as law-abiding citizens, we've made guns a hobby. You know, what better to protect yourself than to be and than to be good with the weapons that you're using to protect yourself. I mean, think about, the Revolutionary War. You know, we were a bunch, these people were a bunch of farmers and a bunch of there were some people adventurers and stuff. You had your John Smiths and things like that that came over to the country, but it was a vast amount of people that had come to the country for political and religious freedoms. And so at that point, most of those people weren't well versed in guns. Maybe some of them had learned because of the way that the terrain was, that there wasn't cleared cities, that we didn't have, big populations in places other than maybe you had started up building bigger towns. And I would say they were only towns in Boston and New York, which I don't think was named New York at the time. And you had Philadelphia and those places that population had accumulated, but it's not like there was a million people there or you know 500,000 people there. Probably it was more like 20 or 30,000 people. And you know so we weren't we we weren't as well versed, but we were getting there. Some people had to be well versed in guns because they had to do it to survive. You still had black bears in the Northeast and moose and things like that honestly could kill you at any moment. So when we argue that you don't know what the the forefathers wanted from it, that they were only there to protect from, you know, to shoot some deers and things of that nature and go duck hunting and stuff like that. It's not the truth. They knew that their government could attack them, and they went through that. That there wasn't there's sometimes there's not a peaceful solution. And if they were going to create a government that was going to be over them here in the US, within their own borders, within their own locality, then they needed to do that with the reassurance, especially at that time, the reassurance that they could defend against it. That if there was a tyrannical, leader, then they could defend against that. And, you know, right now, one of the main and even during World War II, the Japanese said, the one thing that they didn't realize that they did was attack a population of millions of gun owners. That's also why other countries have not just formally come marching in and, ran boats up to our shores and attacked. That's one thing you can say about any European country that, control that have banned guns, is that if an army rolled up, then all of those people in that town or in that coastal region are soft targets. Where in the US, you roll up to any coast and you'll have your soft targets, but you'll have a group of 10 to 50,000 people ready to shoot at you in any moment. And that's not just the army coming up. That's the rural population and the people that own guns. I mean, 300 million people in the U.S. 200 are eligible or so to own guns, and they sell somewhere between, 100 million guns a year. And so they say there's around 400 to 500 million guns in the U.S. And we have a population of probably gun ownership of 150 million probably is what I figure, based on who's eligible. You would think, there's about 100 million kids in the U.S. Between the ages of 0 and 18, or 21. And you've got about 125, 30,000 women and about 70,000 men. And between that, or 70 million, sorry, millions on both of those men. And you figure that maybe about 150 million of the women and men are legal, have not committed felonies or whatever, or more, or health issues or mental health issues or anything like that. And that's probably, actually really low. But you put those numbers together, and just about everybody that could own guns could have about 3 or 4 guns. Now, personally, I've lost all of my guns in a terrific, river boating accident that I just can't find them. But anyhow, the guns though are just a tool. And I know that we can say that, but having the accessibility to guns makes it far more likely that you could get shot by guns. It's the whole live by the sword, die by the sword type thing. If you walk around the streets with a sword and 50 million other people walk around the streets with a sword, then it goes to reason that sword violence would probably go up. Because we get excited, we get crazy. We feel that we get in our feelings and get emotional and that kind of thing. And then we spout off and we do something stupid. And so I do think that, if the world were perfect and we could, trust our government to not attack us, to be a benevolent and upstanding unit, then I think that it would be, that not having guns would be wonderful. Not having missiles would be great. Not having to have autonomous, drones that we send to other countries and blow their stuff up would be cool. And honestly, if we had none of those things, then it would make not having to have them so much more easy. Because it would make the world bigger again. And what we've done by creating all of these weapons that can reach across the globe and everything is we've made the world so small that you have to have a defense system that can be activated in seconds, as opposed to back even during World War II, when honestly rockets were being invented and being, starting to be used by the Germans and and things like that, that you could see, you could still have a sentry post near the border, see 5 to 10 miles. You could see that, and you would know that within the next, by morning, or by, in the next couple hours, 4 or 5 hours, you may be attacked, but most likely it's just you're getting mortar attacked, or you're getting, whatever. And so, your attack speed wasn't what it is today. Now your attack speed is supersonic. It's almost non-seeable. And you and sometimes it is non-seeable because it's stealth technology, you know. And there, honestly, the more and more we get to the point where it's autonomous, and casualties happen, but then the casualties from each country don't happen from the actual attack. There is no collateral damage from the attack on our side, because we don't have anybody in the battle there. We're just sending a drone to blow stuff up. And so the collateral damage is all on their side, and it becomes very impersonal, and it's scary. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about, the legacy of what should happen from, we want to talk about how we prevent, how we stop these school shootings and these school attacks from happening. I mean, this transgender person, just for the fact that he was transgender, or she was transgender, they were transgender, to be politically correct, um, barricaded the door. I don't care if you're cisgender, gay, non-binary, straight, afflicted with any kind of whatever, you got smallpox, or you got anything. I don't. When you go and you do things that do not allow people to escape, you're just there to cause a mass tragedy. And if you if you didn't if you didn't have guns, you'd use a pressure cooker as a bomb. You'd you would figure out a way to still make that happen. Those people, not having guns is going to dissuade a few people that commit suicide. You know, Honestly, the suicide rate would go down quite a bit without guns. It would just change from guns to pills. Really, a lot of the suicide um, is pills anyhow, or drugs, or some kind of easy way out. And guns seem like that sometimes, but these people who are committing mass murders or mass tragedies, this guy didn't just or this person didn't just wake up in the morning and say, today's the day that I go out and commit a mass tragedy or a mass murder. This person went out and was there at the school a week or two prior, scouted the building, had been to the building years prior when he went to school there. Mother had taught there. In all of this preparation, though, is there no one out there that sees this guy? and says, "Are you okay? Do you need some help?" No one comes through and helps this person with their mental health issues. Because you can't tell me that this guy doesn't have mental health issues. That this guy seemed like, oh, but he seemed so well adjusted. No, he didn't. He has video and video of him talking about how the innocence of the youth is it needs to be is corruptible, and how guns and speaking in Russian, and he didn't seem like a regular guy. Regular guys don't go out and turn them and change their names to Robin. I know we want to regularize that, but no one reached out to him. And as a Christian, as an American Christian, what else do we have to do? Like, we are not, we're not trying to figure out a strategy of how to keep ourselves from the government stealing our Bibles, or that we're not out here trying to figure out, what's the best way to get the Bible distributed to people, because all we have to do is buy a Bible and distribute it to people. And there isn't it's not it's not anything else. So somehow, accountability wise, we missed it. As Americans in this country, as Christians, we missed a hurting person. And on that side of it, that it hurts. Because when you miss a hurting person, hurting people hurt people. People who are hurt people. I mean, that's a simplistic statement, but it's so true. Think about even when you just when you argue with your spouse. When things go down and when you get hurt, you lash out. Just like the animals that are on there, get their back up against the wall and fight themselves out of a corner. When you get hurt and you feel like it's the end, you lash out and try to make one last big stand. And honestly, it wasn't, it's funny how we politicize these things, and how we just whatever we want to do, we push our agenda based on whatever happens in the news and things of that nature. But I mean, the Alabama Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth posted a thing saying that, it's time to recognize that there's a growing link between transgender and mass shootings. And he mentions there's about 9 mass shootings that have happened in the last 4 to 5 years or so, including the Minnesota shooting. And all of them are, this is the Denver shooting, Aberdeen shooting, Nashville, Georgia. The Iowa shooter was gender fluid. But we've mentioned, but that's nine shootings that, if it were white bald guys had shot nine of the last how many ever shootings, then they would say, well, white ball guys are a problem. We need to start looking into what makes white ball guys tick. And we've done that before because we've said skinheads are it. They're killing all our black people. And at that time, being a skinhead, there was a thing. You set yourself apart. You showed yourself as you were this, and you did. You were a white supremacist, and you had that ideology or that mentality. And so I don't know why we are not saying, can we not get, some, can we not figure out some mental health way to help transgender people? Maybe is a huge population of well-adjusted transgender people out there. I don't think there's a huge a population of transgender people as they want you to think there is. But in this, Verify, a company who does verification of news and whatever, and obviously posts on X, got on and said, just so everybody knows, there's missing context here. The majority of mass shootings in recent years have been cisgender men, and for that, they or men, obviously cisgender means that they identify with their assigned birth. And then it's great because they then go back to a U.S. Secret Service threat analysis released in 2023, analyzing mass public shootings over a 5-year stretch from 2016 to 2020, where they found the attackers' background were 96% men, 3% women, and 2% transgender. Which really tries to skew it to it's only 2% transgender here. But that was in 2016 to 2020, where we didn't do a lot of we weren't as fluid with who was out, who was in, who was this, who was that. We are now starting to follow it, and none of those mass shootings had happened yet. And so, 5-year period or a 5 years from period, that's almost half a generation of people. That's a completely different time period. From 2016 to 2020, we hadn't had the pandemic yet. We were just coming into 2020 as a pandemic year. Things hadn't changed. The whole DE and I movement hadn't really pushed into things yet. We still had the affirmative action and things like that, and we're just we were it was a different time period. And you can say that again in 2030, that, 2020 to 2025, it was a different atmosphere. They were recovering from, COVID. They were recovering from, they were having troubles figuring out this transgender movement and how they were going to, we haven't created the structure to even, it's almost like we said, that if we had a third party, it would it wouldn't fit the system that we have now, and we'd have to restructure for a third party. And to add a bunch of sexual orientations to whatever we're doing, especially in sports and things of that nature. That's not how we have it set up right now. We have two genders set up, and those two genders are male and female. And we have women's sports and we have men's sports. There isn't a transgender sports. There isn't a gay sports or a or whatever. And the reason there isn't, gay or lesbian sports are because they pretty much would be men or women. I mean, they still identify as that. And so, but the whole gender changing is more to it than just being attracted to somebody else. Um, and so, in all honesty, there should be, if that's what we're gonna go to, we're then we need to make sure that we're changing things. That they have their stuff, and their stuff is whatever. Whether I believe in transgender lifestyle or not, and whether I would affirm it or not, um, either get the mental help you need to, and we need to put out to help them with whatever decision that they're going to make. Because honestly, I've seen all kinds of different statistics and data and things of that nature that, you know, with the actual implications, with the actual implications put together for that, then there, a lot of them have chosen either um not to get their surgeries and things of that nature, and not to go through with transgender changes. And that once they do a lot of these hormone changes and things of that nature, that they are regretful of doing that. And I'm not, not here to say that you should or shouldn't do that. But I do know that for certain reasons that we, there has to be a gender assigning ability, because there are people who are, it's less than 1% of the population that are born with both at birth for whatever reason. Not here to say or judge. I do have one in my family that was born that way, and before I knew them, before I was part of the family, um, they chose, and you know, and that's what they had to do at that time. So the biggest thing, though, that I see beyond this is beyond helping the shooter and helping, try to figure out how to not get, to not have these incidents happen at all, is it's that why Do we run everyone through a metal detector? In federal buildings, we have armed guards at every entrance. We have all of these protections for our federal and state buildings. Even the local city buildings have police officers in them that guard against something like this. But in schools run by the county, the state, the city, we fight so hard to either have a person or a couple people. They're the whatever officer, and they're the officer for the building, blah blah blah. They're you know and yet we don't secure our 49 million young people, kids, possibly up to 55 million, that are in public schools and private schools. We, government employees get protected, but we're not going to protect our kids. We're going to say that these adults, there are 4.3 million government employees, and maybe this makes it easier for them to be protected. And 1.3 million of those 4.3 million government employees are active duty. So with state and local governments, you got about 19 million employees in the local and state governments, and we protect all of those people with a sheriff or two. I know that I know that times are tough, money is tight. There are ways that the government can add money to it. Um, even if these schools hired a private security firm, yeah, it's more expensive, probably, than having a sheriff sit at each school, or two sheriffs, two officers, and we have metal detectors, and we have you know locked and blocked entrances from the outside, and we create more emergency entrances out of things, and the entrance to a building is secured in that. And man, if your kid has to take an extra few minutes to get in the building, and you have to drop them off a blah 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 amount of time early, or the school has to be somewhat lenient on getting to first period, then oh boy, let's inconvenience 49 million kids so that they can go home at the end of the night or end of the day safe and sound. Now, would this have stopped Columbine? No, it wouldn't have. Would it have lessened Columbine? Probably not. Would this have stopped Minneapolis? Yes. Would it have changed the Minneapolis shooting? Yes. Stopped it completely? Maybe not. But having a police officer on the property, having some security cameras or whatever on the property, like, you could run a mass security system set up with 2 or 3 guys on the property of any school with some cameras, which cost nothing anymore. Cameras cost 0. I mean, you could have 10 or 15 cameras for less than $1,000. And you can't say the government doesn't have a bazillion cameras just sitting around somewhere. Whether they're new, old, or whatever. And you can say, well, every year you got to upgrade, or every year you got to maintenance, and it costs this and that. It doesn't matter. You're now putting an extremely low price on the lives of our kids. And this is just one more notch in my belt to say, I'm going to homeschool my kid. Because if you're the government, your only big reason for existing is security, is to keep us safe in our country, is to be there to make sure that the borders are secure and that we have some sort of security in our lives. And honestly, the government's been crappy with it. We have the highest murder rates and homicide rates in the world, in our country. And you know how that's been happening? Or when that started? Back in the 90s. Started steadily rising. Not with newer and better, not with the AR-15's implementation or newer or better guns. Not with more people buying guns, because per capita, we probably had more gun owners back in the 50s than we do now, by far. And there hasn't been a new major gun caliber or style in 50 years. Maybe even 100 years. But somehow we keep pushing this stupid agenda that if we could round them all up, we're going to try to round up 400 million guns as opposed to putting 3 to 5 guys on a campus of a school that holds thousands of people every day. I mean, some of these big schools, they graduate 500-600 people in each class. And some even more. But we're going to say, well, a school ID is enough. I never had a school ID when I was in high school. Our school, I don't think, still has school IDs. There's no scan in, no nothing. We use zero technology to keep our kids safe. We give them computers and we say, go on the internet, do whatever you got to do what you're doing. And we don't put parental guidelines on them. And that's on us parents. So we let our kids get cyberbullied. We send our kids to public schools that don't, this is the parental accountability thing right here. We send our kids to schools that don't have security. We we sit during Christmas vacation. We sit during, summer vacation, and we wait. We count the hours to get rid of our kids and send them back to school. And when they go back to school, we are so relieved. We've got so much. Well, man, that's so great. We're peace and quiet for 7 hours a day that we're not even there. We're at work. Why'd you have kids again? Because one day they'll take care of you? But why would they take care of you? Because they don't even know you. That's why that's part of the problem we have in this country is that we don't respect one another because we don't respect one another. We don't respect our kids as humans. We don't respect our parents as being mature and wise and ahead of our time because they're advanced in their time. There's not a level there, that level of respect is gone. That level of of responsibility. And I think that that's part of it is that we've tried to take responsibility away from everyone, and we've tried to put it on whoever else we want or we can see that is not us. Well, he wasn't taught how to do his laundry growing up, so it's okay that he goes to college without knowing how to do his laundry and just doesn't know how to provide for himself. I mean, he just never wanted to do chores and then things when he was growing up, so we just didn't make him. And now we laugh, it's funny. Okay. If you want your kid to be non-self-sufficient, there are places they can take their clothes to get laundered. There are restaurants that need people to come in every day to feed their kids, to feed your kids. There are any number of places that will take care of people pretty much from head to toe. You can hire a maid. You can all of these different things, and it's not that some people don't need it because being the house parent, the house husband that I am now, um I there are not enough hours in the day to keep the house, the outside, everything in tip-top shape. I don't know how they did it. I'm not maybe I'm not the man that my grandfather was or anything, and I'll admit that. But with my wife working full time and all of that, we still prioritize our daughter. We prioritize that there are days that we don't want, we would want to send her off to whatever, but we prioritize giving her the attention and the time that she needs. You know, she's 3 and she needs some attentions from time to time. And sometimes we see when she's acting out Yes, we still discipline. Yes, there's a corner, a spanking, you know, a whatever that, you know, hitting leads to. But also there's some time where acting out leads to you need some time. You need to go run outside. You need a redirection. And we as a society, we've tried to figure out all of the ways that we could pawn the responsibility off on someone else. And I think here we are. Mass shootings happen and we're not securing places. We're walking around you know, like we're taking the responsibility on our own. And in a school, we've done everything we can do to strip the ability to secure a location from our teachers, from our janitors, from our whoever. And we also just and then we say, well, this is such just a one-off tragedy. How many of these one-off tragedies does it take to then be no longer a one-off tragedy? How easy would it to be to have a campaign that normalizes mental health issues, that allows you to think it's okay to go get help for mental health issues, and not normalizes it as in, oh, everyone has to, we have to be sensitive to your mental health. Not normalizing it as in, let's be overly sensitive and coddle these people, but or the things that we go through, but normalize it as in, it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be, to be down. It's okay to have depression and to have anxiety and things of that nature. It is not okay to run amok and use them as an excuse. It's not okay for me to say I'm not going to feed my child because I don't feel like getting out of bed today because of ADHD. It's not okay to say I don't want to get off the couch. I'm going to sit here and watch TV all day and the house is going to become a disaster and my child is going to run amok because I have ADHD. Now, there are days that she runs amok. And she is pretty good at 3 years old at getting her own yogurts in the morning and letting dad sleep an extra half hour with his eyes half open while she plays in her bedroom and has a yogurt. Or, you know, while I lay on the couch and I give her some cereal and throw some Curious George on and allow her to just absorb that for a couple hours or an hour while I catch an extra hour after having been up, putting her back to bed and going, and just the normal everyday man over 40, bathroom routine, sleeping cycle type things. But it's not okay to use it as an excuse to do why I was not a good parent or a man. It's not an excuse to why I got angry and yelled at somebody. It's just not an excuse. And so we need to normalize that. So normalize getting the help you need, figuring it out. All of these people who went and got a degree in psychology that can't use it for anything because it's not a master's or a doctorate. Well, these people should have some training in psychology and should be able to help somebody by at least listening to them, at least forming a group that of like-minded people that are able to, you should be able to do something. And so all of these people out there who need help, let's get them some help. Let's make an AI thing. Let's get these people some help. Let's figure out the bottom line of all of this PTSD stuff that allows our soldiers who fought, who put their lives on the line and literally have put their lives on the line for us because it was the right thing to do, and have now put their lives on the line because they're now homeless, because they can't fight PTSD the way that they need to, because they don't have the mental capacity anymore to get past what they saw. And some people, maybe they'll never get past it, but we're not helping them by allowing them to live on the streets. And you're always going to have your people who live on the streets. Even the Bible says you'll always have your poor and your downtrodden and your, and your honestly mentally handicapped people or mentally unhealthy people. You'll always have those people. You'll always have your people with leprosy or whatever that are not able to function in society. And we should take care of those people. You want to go and we want to worry about all of these people that we've just sent out of our country. Well, let's make our country great. Let's take care of those people. Let's feed our hungry kids here in the US that have depravities because they're not their family can't afford to feed them. Let's stop sending millions of dollars to Ukraine. I understand the why we need to keep Ukraine sovereign, but we were sending millions and billions of dollars to Ukraine to pay for Biden's son's mess up, to pay for to repay the the mistake he made or whatever he did in that country, and for they paid for the access to Biden. Somehow they paid for access to Biden, gave Biden's son a job, and somehow he messed it up, and we now had to pay back millions and millions of dollars so that they could stay sovereign, so that the government could be in place the way it is, and so that so secrets didn't come out. Let's take care of our people. Let's start with securing our schools. I don't care that hiring 3 people costs $300,000 to a school. You know, and if we just took public schools, there's about 99,000 public schools in the U.S. If we just took public schools and secured them, private schools would secure themselves. And maybe that private school charges a little bit more. Maybe it does. You know, what is it? What does that matter? If a private school charges a little bit more, it doesn't. It people who go to private schools, people who send their kids to private schools, they weigh the cost, and I'm pretty sure that any of them would jump at the chance to have a more secured school. If we did this, we've talked about, there's not good jobs out there. We would create 297,000 jobs. We're talking about places coming into our state that are going to, they just gave $78 million, $76 million to the airport in Dayton. Some of it's directly to the airport, some of it's part of the project. But they just, about $76 million to create anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 jobs. We're putting three security officers just for this school. Just for the school. Each school. And some of them only need 2. If you've just got, whatever. If you just got a building and everybody goes to one school, fine. But if you have multiple buildings and, you've got one or two guys that, watch the cameras, keep on those guys, and you get, I don't know that there's anywhere that some AI program, some programmer can't AI program a security camera setup that allows them to, show unidentified people on the property. I can't see that wouldn't be something that okay, we boom, it pops up, Google searches their face or whatever, and shows who they are, if they're a threat, if they're not a threat. I got no problems with that. We already live in a society of Overwatch. We already live in a society. We've talked about it. We live in a society that's in surveillance all the time. We're in surveillance in our intersections. We're in surveillance when we're near federal buildings. We're in surveillance anytime that, you go to a major city. There are multiple surveillances. And why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we securing our schools? You know why? And this is going to sound redundant. This is going to sound tongue in cheek. This is going to sound perfect world situation, but it's because we let the government freaking do this. We allow you think about how much you pay in dues. You pay blah, blah, blah amount in dues every year. And if I got to delete a couple things here real quick. And say that you have, I don't know, 1,500 kids in your school. It just seems like a round number. It seems pretty low. But if you have 100 kids, 100 and some kids in your school, this is just a smaller school, I guess. 100 some kids per class, and you got 12 classes, K through 12. So you got 13 really. That's a little over 100 people in each class. And we're paying taxes. Sometimes a couple percent of what we owe or of what we get is our taxes for our kids or for the schools. And say that we pay, every year we have to pay so much to for dues, for school books and dues and stuff like that. And say that whole total ends up being, I don't know, what do you think? 500 bucks, which seems pretty low again. Right off the top, you're talking about not too much. $750,000. And then they get a bunch of money from, or they're supposed to get a bunch of money from these lotteries. Millions of dollars from these lotteries that we have. Right now, the lottery in for the Powerball is $1.2 billion. They're going to tax that person over half, like 56% pretty much, for that, for that lottery. That's just one. Like it's gone over months now, but for that, that goes to your schools. If we took the money that we spend in taxes, and you spend up to 25-30% in taxes, if we took that money back from the government and we spent it on our schools as a private school, and we put millions of dollars from us into our schools, you don't think we would hire great teachers? You don't think we would hire great security? It's the government, and then we want to go in and say, yeah, you guys who can't run or can't keep our kids safe, you guys that can't keep our borders safe, you guys that can't keep, they can't keep yourselves together, that can't keep yourselves from corruption. Yeah, let's give you guys all the guns. Now you see why it doesn't make sense to restrict guns. It doesn't make sense also that we're not securing things with all these guns. That we're not securing our schools. That we're not, and we can say all we want about let's give some school teachers some guns. It's a good idea, but it's just one minute idea. School teachers have guns. But we're not deterring anybody by saying, well, some do and some don't. If we put a big old sign up front that says you're coming through security to get in our building or get on our property, like, we don't have gates on our property with an ID that allows the gate to pop up to get on the property. We're not, some of our community, we're protecting our communities better than we're protecting our schools that have kids who can't own guns, who blah, 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 they're kids. Let's keep them safe. Let's get them home safe. I'm not saying let's put them in tanks. I'm saying let's do what we do for us. If your company didn't secure you and you worked with secure materials, with sensitive information, with whatever, and they didn't keep you safe, and any moment you know that some crazy person could be shooting you up, you're not in this business. You're not working there. You're not going to that business place unless you're crazy like a military person. Unless you're a police officer that wants to jump in the line of duty. And more power to you if you are. But then they arm you. If you go to a job, 90% of the people, if they go to a job that deals with sensitive material or puts them in the line of danger, they either guard you or they give you the weapons to fight against somebody that was going to come at you. Now, I'm not saying we hand guns to kids. I'm saying we secure the kids. We guard kids. Take care of them. I know I've ranted a long time on this, but there are multiple steps to it. There are multiple layers to this, and I understand them. And I'm showing you, I understand these in multiple layers. But the Second Amendment says that guns should not be infringed upon. So to get that changed is going to be a ton of work. And honestly, I don't think it should be changed. But let's start with the simple, stupid problems and fix them. The easiest fixes are the easiest fixes. And most of the time, those easy fixes are the things that will actually work towards actually impacting things. Let's impact people and let's keep people safe. Honestly, it really is a thing that I put on the list about keeping my, about sending my kid to school. And I know that I don't have armed guards around my home, but I also know that I'm going to protect my child with my life. And that teacher has 35 children to protect with her life or his life. I got better odds. And with Google and AI and all of these different programs, I have all the skills and all the tools that I need to give my kid a good or better education than you can at schools. And the more and more I think about socialization and things of that nature, the more I put my kid into situations where they have to talk to adults and they have to talk to other kids and have to learn how to get into a social situation. Like, I'll take her to the park and say hi to the other kids. Let's go ahead and play with the other kids. Get into, that's what we deal with all the time. When we walk into a restaurant, when we walk into, when we go to the bar, when we go clothes shopping or we go try to buy a car or anything, is we have to deal with either people who are older or younger than us, and we have to get into a situation where we have to introduce ourselves, and we have to, within a few seconds, tell our story. If you're buying a car, my car broke down and I need a new car, and we don't, for one, we don't teach people how kids how to be comfortable in a situation where you're meeting a new person for a first time. And part of that is we have stranger danger, but we don't teach them the nuances beyond what stranger danger is. Well, yeah, don't put yourself in a situation that the guy with the white van and the candy picks you up and takes you. But the person at the store that you willingly just walked into, talk to that person. Wave at a stranger. Not everybody out there in the world is out to get you. There are those that are. And putting 1,000 kids in a school, definitely puts your kids at risk. But publicly, if we all, spent $100 a month and put $1,000 into our schools every year, an extra, we all spent that. We all put our money into our school systems and got to choose where they went because of their, security, because of whatever criteria you deem important, instead of being lazy parents and just sending our kids to the school. And I know a lot of people who have sent their kids to public school. I went to public schools, but I always know that my mom, my dad, my parents went to the school, checked out the school. And a lot of times they did that even before we bought the house or rented the house or moved into the area, is that the schools were checked out. And I don't feel like we do that like we did. I haven't, in the last few times I've bought a house or rented a house, that because I didn't have kids to check the school out. But I always know when I moved into an area what the rating of the school was, just in case sometime that would happen. Now our school district does not have security, doesn't have a ton of security. I'm sure it has some security. A lot of the schools have on-duty officers that do their thing and do the best they can. And this is no indictment to the officers that already work on school campuses. It's just the fact that we haven't given them resources to be the best they can be, to be the highest security that they can be. It takes nothing to put, like I said, 10, 20 cameras on 5 or 6 buildings and have a secure central location, closed circuit or whatever, to be able to secure a location. It doesn't take that much to put fences or security checkpoint areas, security bottlenecks around our properties to keep our kids safe there either. Most of these guys that are shooting up schools are walking on with bags of guns. And it's not the bags of guns that are the issue. It's the people who do not stop the bags of guns getting on our property. Let's stop it before it happens. Now, you can say, well, what if this guy gets through the security checkpoint because he says blah, blah, blah? Then he says blah, 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 and it gets through. But how many did we stop? Or how many did we deter from even showing up? Because there's just a chance that they don't even get through the security checkpoint. That's where, it's just the level of care. Think of the things that the bad guys think of, and then stop those things. The best security is going into the mind of a bad person and, fixing the problems. We haven't done a lot of fixing problems over the last 50 years of laws and regulations. We've done a lot of reacting to the things that have already happened. The best security is the security you never have to use, because nobody ever gets to that point. Grenade launchers in the middle of the school would be a great security if no one ever had to use them. So I just, again, I went long on this. I've got a couple other subjects I want to talk about, and I may add them to this podcast. I may just make a completely separate podcast, and just the dust has settled a little bit. We're kind of starting to see the picture. Transgender woman attacked a school, and it really still gets me that those people from the last couple of shootings have talked about attacking the innocence of our country. And we're more and more taking the Bible and taking Christianity out, but that doesn't mean it's gone. That just means that the religion of Christianity is gone. The spirits are still there. The devil's still trying to attack you, and he's still trying to take you out and win. And so, the more we equip ourselves, the more that we build ourselves up to be a beacon of light for God, the better we are. The more we can fight spiritually, the better we are. And so I think that that this is it for this podcast. And I just pray for you guys. I just pray that your kids get home from school safe, and that you don't ever have to worry about your kids not. So, love you guys, and this is the Why I'm Angry podcast, signing off, saying sayonara. See you later. Hasta luego. Remember to follow, like, and share the Why I'm Angry podcast across all social media platforms and anywhere you get your podcast. The Why I'm Angry podcast ends now.